Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here, and I've been quite inspired listening to everyone and what they've been working on, both clinically and research-based. It's really amazing the work that's been done for children with autism and in support of them. As was spoken, I started my practice really seeing the age range of children from little bitty to older, and what my real passion was to figure out, kind of as Cynthia spoke, how can we get those kids, when the teacher walks away, to be silly or to possibly break a rule? What do we need to do to get those kids to notice what to do and to act accordingly in the moment? So I really looked and started looking at all the research and all the clinical work that had been done on social emotional learning, and 7 years ago decided to open up a school to focus on social emotional development for children of early learners, so 3 years old up to 6 years old. And what I really looked at from the beginning was, how does social development start? And it really starts with me learning to use the clicker. Oh, there we go. All right. So how it really starts is so young in infancy, where we start, as you can see with typically developing children, that first engagement, that first shared experience. And what do we need to go back to with kids with social challenges, whether it's autism or related disorders that have social challenges? How do we go back to get that shared enjoyment from every child? Because I do believe that every child has the intrinsic motivation and the intrinsic desire to share an experience, but there are obstacles that come in their way and thwart their experience to connect with another person. So what do we look at? What do we look at is really the trust relationship, and the relationship you start with in the very beginning is your parent-child relationship. And when I talk to my teachers in the school that I started, is we start with trust. You have to gain the rapport, you have to gain that attunement. And you saw in a lot of the videos yesterday that Tracy had and that Joan had, those kids wouldn't have gotten to the point they got to within their therapy if they didn't have the rapport and the trust with the therapist. So we start there, and then what we want to do is build problem solving. So essentially what I look at when I think about Cynthia's example of what does the child do when the teacher walks away, they aren't problem solving the situation. They aren't noticing that, oh sweet, I can actually not do what I'm supposed to do because the teacher is walking away. They just sit there because no one's prompting them on what to do. What I want kids to do from a very early age is start to learn to problem solve, because inherently social skills and social development is cognition and problem solving and thinking about what's supposed to happen in the moment and what I'm supposed to do in that moment of problem solving. And what happens with a lot of kids with social challenges, which we heard a lot in the talks yesterday about the brain and the neuroscience, is there is inherently an underconnectivity for kids with social challenges between how they take in information, make meaning of the information, and how they output that information. So as I talk to my teachers and my parents, that's essentially a conveyor belt. And their conveyor belt can either go slower, or there's lots of ways that it offshoots it, and it's not working smoothly. So what do we need to do with these kids is really think about that problem-solving conveyor belt. And for a lot of our kids, parents will come in and say, my child is so rigid, my child is so inflexible. That's because the conveyor belt, that information processing, the social cognition that it takes to navigate a room and what you're supposed to do in a room is so difficult because it's dynamic in thinking. It's a gray area thinking. There's black and white thinking that's very easy. A teacher tells me to sit, I sit. A teacher tells me to stand up, or the bell rings, I get up. But it's all that gray area in between. Now the teacher's moved over here, and no one's prompting me on what to do. So now I have to problem solve a situation and notice what's happening and notice what other kids are doing and how I have to adapt my actions accordingly. So I really look at I don't want to teach a child a skill because, as was pointed out by Cynthia, you can teach a child a skill to say hello, but saying hello at the sandbox, saying hello in the library, and saying hello at a middle school dance are quite different hellos. And if we all just say, hello, my name is Lauren, I'm going to get weird looks, I'm going to get kids walking away from me, and all that does to me and my self-esteem is validate that I'm not a good social problem solver. But really, it's in the cognition of how to dynamically think about those situations and how to become a social problem solver. And one of the ways we look at it, and the way I teach my teachers, is because I believe, and many people have also said, you come at it from a success-based model, and you want the child to do good. You want them to learn at the edge of their competence, but not overtaxing them in different directions. We look at what their makeup of challenges are, and every child is quite different in what we call it at my school, the pizza pie of obstacles that come up for these different kids. It could be their attention, it could be anxiety, it could be the language. All kids with autism or related social challenges, the social skill that we're trying to teach, that's the obstacle that's at the tip of the iceberg. The obstacles that underlie what is making it very difficult for that child to gain that intrinsic motivation, that ability to connect, is all these challenges that underlie it. So what we do at our school is every child, we figure out what their obstacles are, and then we scaffold around it. I'll show you some videos in a little bit. And it's just as important to watch how the teacher is scaffolding as it is to watch how the child's gaining the skill, because the child can only gain a skill if they're supported in the ways that they need to be supported, and if their obstacles are supported and their challenges are scaffolded so that they're at their optimal way of learning. What I'm going to talk about today is just the beginning of how we get kids to be social cognition problem solvers, and how. Oh.
Step a little.
Oh.
And if you press this one, the slide will go blank.
This one?
No, this. You have to press only this one.
Oh. Yeah. Okay. I'll problem solve as we're going. Get on my spot. So these are the areas that we're going to start with when we're trying to build up a child's ability to relate and socially connect with other people. So we started we look at what I looked at, and what the research shows is neurotypical development and how neurotypical kids gain social skills and social development. And so we start at that level. Oh, look how much smoother the slides are going now. Where do we start really is nonverbal problem solving. And Dr. Joshi yesterday really handed it on a silver platter of what makes it so difficult for kids, especially of all from mild to high-end spectrum kids, is they're not reading the social cues. So when you're trying to become a dynamic thinker and a dynamic problem solver, you have to be able to read cues and adapt your actions accordingly. But that's so difficult, because think of the information processing conveyor belt of you've got to take in that information, and your cue versus someone else's cue may be quite different. And it's actually amazing to be in India because we all nod differently, and I didn't know that. And so when Indian woman they don't shake their heads yes, but they do a different way to say yes, and I didn't know that. So it's all different types of nonverbal communication, and we have to input that information and make meaning of it. And for our kids, where that whole connectivity is weaker, the nonverbal communication is so much more difficult. So what our kids do is become very reliant on verbal communication, and it works, because if you prompt a child, they're going to respond. So as a teacher, it's an easier way to get a result is to give a verbal prompt and get an action and a result. But in the end, that's not helping a child become a problem solver and learn when or when not they can break a rule in the classroom, because they're not noticing what's going on around them. And when I do a lot of school consulting, I really have teachers decrease your communication and learn how to reference to the child. And one of the studies I always talk about when doing trainings with teachers and parents is how early on nonverbal problem solving starts for everyone. At 9 months of age, there was a study that was done on, actually it had nothing to do with referencing, but it was on the depth perception of would a child perceive a visual drop-off. So a child was on one side of a glass, like floor, and the parent was on the other side. And what they noticed was not about more than the depth perception piece was when the child got to the perceived cliff, they would look to their parent. And if the parent gave a calm, soothing face, they would crawl right over to the parent. If they got to that perceived drop-off and a parent gave a concerned or worried face, they would revert back to the beginning. So what it shows us is from a very early age, typically developing kids notice, and that's a complete communication feedback loop. But what happens for all of our kids, as any of you would notice, our kids are going to get distracted by the red and white squares. They're going to get overwhelmed by the visual stimuli that's there, so they miss the referencing. So they're not developing that at the same rate as typically developing children. So they're losing that communication feedback loop at such an early age, and so thus starts the way that these kids start thinking in a more static way of processing information because they're missing lots of the what we call like broadband communication. So I'm going to show you a video of how we work on referencing at our school where the teacher is giving information from a there's different levels of referencing, but in this situation, she's giving information and referencing to a child how to pick up where a frog is. So everything in our school is theme-based. So in this situation, they're focusing on the rainforest. So that's the academic curriculum. But then what we're also focusing on, our social goal is really on the nonverbal feedback. So the child is supposed to go pick up a frog and put it in the little safari thing that they have set up. Is the audio? So you'll watch her face, the teacher's face, and he's referencing her for the information of how to find the frog. So what he has to do is find the frog and then put it on the green lily pad. So what you'll notice with this is going back to the pizza pie idea, this child has motor planning issues. So if we were focusing on the nonverbal communication, we're going to give him this scooter because if we had him walk from point A to point B, he might be distracted by other things in the room. And our focus in this context is really getting him to reference her face and follow her face to the information because that's how we're trying to get him to notice that words can mean something, but also faces can also communicate what you need. The next video is referencing for feedback and approval, disapproval. So it's basically a simple game of red light, green light, but the teacher is using her face to give the gesture of yes and no's to the children. So again, it's about, yes, 9 times out of 10, I have a family come in for an evaluation and they say, my child has no eye contact, fix my child's eye contact. I can fix a child's eye contact by prompting them to look at me, but what I can't fix is in that situation, if I'm just prompting them to look at me, they may look at me every time they enter my office, but what they're not understanding is the function of why you look at someone. But if you do it in a success-based model and in a play-based way, these kids now know that that teacher's face is giving them information and it's comfortable to them and they're doing it without even thinking about it because they know the context of this game and they've done it verbally, so now you take the language out of it and these kids are learning to read faces for information. The next video I'm going to show is a 2-part video, and it's a lesson being taught. The theme is travel. So it's a kindergarten classroom, and they're making suitcases. And the goal is making suitcases, but that's really the background. The foreground is getting kids to go through the entire lesson without the teacher using any language and having them read the nonverbals. So you'll see you have to watch both the teacher and the kids because they're learning to problem solving. And as our focus is on the dynamic analysis of how to problem solve a situation and what is the teacher thinking, it's that beginning steps of perspective taking of what do I need to gain from the teacher and what do I need to do as the student.
Show how to make this, but I'm not gonna tell you. That means I won't use any words. So you have to look to learn. Okay, here I go. If you're looking, you'll learn how to make a suitcase. Ooh, orange.
And you have to notice how slow the teacher goes and how much time she gives the kids to process.
Yellow. Whoa, this paper is longer than I expected. Me too.
So now she wants them to fold the paper, but she's not going to prompt them on how to fold it.
I did it. Do it again, please. Open it. Open it. Open it. Huh? Wait, please. Wait, please.
So now she's setting up a problem that they need to go get glue, and the kids in the class know where the glue is, but they have to try to figure out they have to notice what she's wanting.
Round, please. Round, please. Round, please. Round, please.
Oh. Oh.
Glue. Glue. Got it. Glue. Glue together. Glue together.
Oh.
And the next thing that's purposely set up is there's not enough glue for every kid in the class, so they have to problem solve this.
I can't reach. Oh. Not gross stick. New thing. You must mine says it blue. I'm already done by stripes, of course. I'm gonna.
So what we learn from this and what the kids learn is not about making a suitcase. Their suitcases were great, but it's really about all of the problem solving that happens in those situations. So what we think about in the stair step of social development is once kids are starting to notice, the next area that we really want to focus on, is how you can co-regulate with another person. So as you've learned to notice a person, the next stage in typical development is moving together with another person. So if you look at typical development at like 24 months of age, you start to do all of that parallel play. What I was interested in way back when I was doing my dissertation is why were so many kids getting flagged, and this was like 20 years ago, luckily now kids are getting flagged earlier, why were kids getting flagged at 4 and 5 years of age? And most of the descriptions you would see from teachers and parents were really about they were on the edge of the playground. They weren't integrated into the group. They were always outside of the group. So what that really delineates is by 48 months of age, kids are now, in typical development, kids are co-regulating with each other, and they're moving together in a synchronized way. But if you think about that, and think about you going for a walk with your friend, that takes an incredible amount of dynamic thought process. I can't just walk at the speed I want to walk at. I have to think about what my friend's pace is. I either may need to speed up or slow down, depending on what their pace is. And our kids have a very, again, black and white way of thinking. So we have to look at it from the process way. And so what we do is create success-based, play-themed activities to give them that success of moving together in a synchronized way to help them understand themselves in relation to others. Because it's all about, if you're thinking about it from the dynamic feedback loop, I have to constantly be adapting myself in relation to someone else. So we start to build that gradually, and we start with simple synchronized actions where you'll see in the next video, kids are just carrying something in the hallway. But if I set it up where two kids were carrying something separately, they're going to inevitably fail because I'm going to think about myself and this person's going to think about themselves. But we set it up where they have to carry it together, and then instead of verbally prompting them, they have the physical model to remind themselves to be connected to each other.
Ready? I can't even watch where I'm going. Together. Yeah. Whoa, whoa!
Wow, you guys are staying together.
So you set it up that if it breaks, they just got prompted. They weren't thinking about each other, so they have to start it over. And then we simply, these are littler kids. Oh, this one you have to start for me. These are littler kids. Oh, can you press play on this one? So in this way, we're setting it up for a motor type activity. And all we're going to do is highlight that moment when all the kids are working together.
Whoa, it looks like they're rolling jack.
Oh, Will's going to join? They could use your help, Will. Oh, I heard Crosby say, help, Will.
Ask him again.
Oh, here he comes. The whole group is working together.
Could you press play on this one? This is another one where we're just getting them at such an early age to notice each other, notice how they can synchronize their movements with each other.
Just tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready, I'll start.
Let's get a beat.
And again, we're not going to prompt the little guy, we're just going to notice.
Tap your hands on your knees. Stretch side to side. Arms up.
And these are little beginning 3-year-olds with not a lot of language, but we're getting them to notice each other.
Round and round. Legs up. Hold them up high. Legs down. Bottom up.
Bottom up.
Whoa, bottom down. Just tell me when you're
Together through the whole course. So now as they get older, we kind of set up obstacle courses for them. Wow, I like how you guys are using teamwork. Amazing. So what we want to do now is, as they've started to notice each other and synchronize their actions with each other, we have to up the level of social development, and we have to start adding variations in, because really, what do kids do? They move fast, they move slow, and our kids get lost all the time in that because they don't know how to modulate their speed. And a lot of our kids, once they start getting fast, they don't know how to slow it back down. So their engines go and they go off the charts, and then they don't know how to bring it back. So then we start working on activities where we're modulating the speed and we're going faster and slower. So we do it in a way, and you'll see in the next video, where again, it's all about the scaffolding and without being a verbal prompter, because we want them to feel success and we want them to learn to repair the breakdowns in all of these activities as a group. And this can be with a parent and a child or two kids working together. The next video, we're trying to get two friends that are always moving fast and really need to learn to modulate and regulate their body. We want them to start to learn to go slow, go fast. So the hula hoop, they think it's the theme of we're rowing a boat, but really it's when their belly goes up against the hula hoop, oh wait, I'm going too fast, so I have to modulate my body. Row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. You can do the same thing with anything. You're just teaching them to notice speed and modulation changes, because that's all about the dynamic analysis of how your body is socially connected. So now they're just rolling Play-Doh. And the next video, the theme was fall colors. So instead of everyone painting individually, because then you're not learning to be connected and engage in a dynamic way, we have two friends.
Ready for
You'll see they're rolling marbles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you're
Good advice.
There. Go. Slow. Mix them slow.
Wow, you guys are doing a great job.
Slow.
So there's paint in there that's rolling back and forth.
Pretty good. Ooh. I think you guys can do fast. I'm going to count.
Fast
You get
together.
this many seconds. Ready, set, go. 3, 2, 1, go. Good work.
It's always about knowing when to end it, too. And so what you want to do, so then after kids learn to kind of regulate their bodies and they notice a friend, now we have to teach them the dance. Now we have to teach them to enter the sandbox, to enter the middle school dance. But how do we do that when kids don't naturally know how to join and play? So what we've done is break it down into pattern play, and we teach them really simple patterns and give them roles where their roles are connected, because that's how they're going to initially learn to dynamically analyze how I am connected to you and how my body needs to adapt to your body. So this first video is a little guy with his parents, not a lot of language, and what we're trying to do for this little guy is to increase his ability to sustain his engagement with a partner. And he gets very easily distracted because it's so hard. It's the whole muscle of thinking about and processing that information is really difficult for him.
I got one here.
So all the parents are doing is handing him a cube, he's taking it over to his mom and putting it in the bin. What I'm asking them to do is dynamically change what they're doing. So he's learning to take the guidance from them rather than them taking the guidance from him, which naturally parents become the guidee to the child rather than the child learning to be the learning to take the guidance from the parents. So you'll notice the parents move around so that he's having to analyze and adapt his actions. And my biggest goal with parents is to reduce their language. They could prompt him through this activity and he would do it so much faster, but he's not processing it. The next video I want to show is these guys, before I set up a pattern for them, how disconnected the play is.
Chickens.
Just for a second, I will show where they have the same toys, but I haven't set up a pattern for them. Now I'm setting up a really simple pattern of one's going to put it in the truck and the other one's going to deliver it.
Okay, more food for the farmhouse. Nice.
And you can see how once they have a patterned play engagement, they enjoy each other and they share the experience.
Hi. Oh, delivery.
And they're connected and they're adapting, they're dancing with each other essentially.
Oh, delivery. Oh no. More food.
So I'll show you a couple more of how you bring the patterned play and the role play into different scenarios where now they're building. One's the cinder and one's the builder. And again, this goes to the dynamic thought process of he doesn't get to pick the blocks he has to build with, and the other guy can't pick how the building is made. So they're having to think about each other and work together in a collaborative way. And then as they get used to this pattern, then you'll hear the teacher in a second say, we're going to switch it up, and now you're going to be the cinder and you're going to be the builder.
One more piece.
You can do this same type interaction with any multitude of things to get kids connected together. If we just said clean up the balls, every kid would individually go and clean up their balls and not think about the other person in the interaction. But when we give them roles, they have to think and engage with the other person. And again, these are the simplest levels of how to create the engagement and how to create the problem solving. The next video I'll show you just a second of is how we then start to build in the collaboration of now they're using the roles of I'm going to hand it to you and you're going to build, but we're adding in the communication. So it takes it to that next level of collaboration, and now we're going to share we're starting to develop those ideas.
Maddie, if you notice something, you could tell Kuba.
So the social language is still difficult. He knows there's an issue, but he doesn't know how to communicate it. So the teacher gives him a little bridge.
That's not the right. That's how do I find them? What? We're gonna build another level, guys. So we might have to.
Well, John's telling you something about what you guys are making.
We can't. We are not building another level yet. Cool. We're not making another level yet.
So they have to start working on ideas and thoughts. And what we do from there, because one of my biggest things is when I go into schools, we can't teach kids to be flexible problem solvers if they haven't yet learned to notice each other and they haven't learned to connect in a physical way and notice how to adapt their skills. So if we just talked about, let's push the flexibility and push that this child can't sit in the blue chair, we're going above where they are if they haven't yet noticed that there are other kids in the room that might want that blue chair. So if we just start with the ideas and thoughts, one might look at this picture and say, it's a duck, and think the entire room thinks it's a duck, whereas another person might look at this picture and say, no, it's a rabbit, and I think everyone thinks it's a rabbit. But once a child has learned to do some referencing and learn to adapt their actions and that other people have other actions, they learn to appreciate how thoughts are different and how ideas are different. So I'll show you a short video of how we're getting kids to come up with a new yoga pose and how we use a visual to get them to appreciate their idea versus another kid's idea.
One thought bubble, two thought bubbles.
So 3 kids merging their ideas together.
Your thought bubbles are going to have your own ideas for a yoga pose. Different. One thought bubble for Johnson, one for Riley, and one for Cooper. Then, at the end, we're going to do a group plan together. When you have
So they start to come up with their ideas, and then here's how it
this
is.
was your own thought bubbles. This is the whole group Bronson, Riley.
So we start to give them that idea that you can
Brother,
collaborate your ideas
Rocco's.
together.
That has a little bit of Bronson's idea, a little bit of, and a little bit of.
And here's the end result. Wait, what was the name again, guys?
Drag kitty corn.
Drag kitty corn.
Dragon, tans, kitty back, and corn.
So again, the take home is build from a success-based model, scaffold for these kids, and build their skills from the top down, and these kids can gain the intrinsic motivation to want to share the social engagement. Thank you.